So the Sivir rework is finally stable on the PBE. There were a lot of changes to her. She went through a few iterations. It was actually kind of hard to keep track of everything, but now that she's in a stable state, I put a few games into her. I'd like to share my thoughts about where I think she's going to end up in the meta, if she's more fun to play, if she's a better champion. Spoiler alert, yes, Sivir is a better champion. A much better champion, actually. Yeah, so let's just start with the problems with current Sivir, like what they were trying to solve with this midscope. Sivir is pretty unquestionably one of the worst AD carries in the game. You know, she has a niche. You're supposed to pick her in a specific niche. She's really good. She's supposed to be like the tank meta AD carry. You have a bunch of tanks on her team, you have a bunch of tanks on the enemy team, and then her ricochets and her boomerang blade can kind of pierce through the tanks, hit the backline anyway, and she's really good at AoE team fighting. And at enabling her own tank line and kind of holding her own there while defended. The problem is she kind of does no damage and is also unsafe. She still does the job of, like, wave clearing better than any other AD carry. Like, she is the best marksman to patch up a wave clear hole in these, like, macro-style comps, but that alone isn't a very compelling reason to pick a champion, right? Like, to do one thing because your draft sucks. These are the numbers of current Sivir, right? She's supposed to walk up to people and compensate for her 500 auto range with just good stickiness, this movement speed to protect her, a spell shield to protect her, more movement speed, right? But in reality, the numbers on this, like, Q is kind of the only ability worth a damn other than her ultimate. You pretty much just build Sivir to optimize this Q-AD ratio and poke people, and then you're playing around a very slow, dodgeable ability that can be nullified by minions. The numbers here suck. The fact that she only gets 3 attacks on Ricochet sucks. If the enemy has nothing to spell shield, you can't walk up. You're a utility bot. You are a wave clear and movement speed bot. Which has changed very, very significantly here. So, first of all, I'm just going to run through the abilities, so we can kind of see everything that she does, if my alt tap's kind of bugging out here. First, most noticeable, her passives actually... It feels like a real ability, and the only thing they did, they just boosted the numbers. So, like, if I auto-attack someone here, like, I'm fast. I am noticeably way faster. Boomerang Blade, it is faster on the way out and slower on the way in now. The damage is reduced, like, they've lowered the damage a little bit. They've lowered the AD ratio. They've dramatically lowered the mana cost, which is huge. It used to be 110, now it's 75. But there's now an effect where... yeah, if you build crit, the damage dealt by the ability increases. So this effectively increases the ratio as well. Once you get to the super late game, your Q does do more damage than even a lethality build, right? But at least it has a higher ratio than it would have before. But for most of the game, the damage is actually slightly down in exchange for a bit more reliability, and Sivir is pretty hard bound to crit. Like, the lethality build is completely dead. Good riddance, to be honest. And is it okay for Sivir to be crit bound? Yes, because Ricochet is a god mode ability now. It is so much better. So the attack speed bonus while Ricochet is active that used to be on ultimate is now just on her W. You activate Ricochet, you gain attack speed. That effect scales with your ranks in Ricochet. And the biggest thing is, instead of just 3 auto attacks, you get just a flat 4-second buff. The more attack speed you have, the more Ricochet autos you have. That's a huge boost to DPS alone. But then there's more, because it's also kind of like a pseudo-brand ultimate. So what would have happened before is, as soon as the Ricochet passed through these 3 targets, it would just fizzle out. Now it can bounce 8 times, and if there's no new targets to hit, it just starts going back to old targets. So, and it's got some decent reach, right? Like, these two are obviously just stuck bouncing between each other. This is hitting the backline. Like, imagine a tank is actually significantly in front of his backline, and you start shredding these two. They're obviously going to split up. Like, this is kind of an unrealistic scenario, but still, the damage is so much better on this thing. And then, you know, coupled with passive being a real ability, coupled with spell shield, restoring health instead of mana, and triggering your passive now. Even though Sivir still does have, like, this terrible 500 auto attack range, she just in general feels a little bit safer, closer to the enemy, which is awesome. And the reward for being closer to the enemy is actually justifiable. And if you're just throwing your W through a minion wave, of course, you get a lot more value out of it than before. Because if your enemy doesn't like full back off from the minion wave, it's just going to start bouncing between them and the minion over and over and over and over again. So, huge changes. Now, unfortunately, the ultimate is, I'm not going to say terrible by comparison, but it serves a different purpose that comes online much, much later. So there's no initial speed boost now. If I tap R, like, that is noticeably bad movement speed compared to what it used to be. The thing that it actually does now, I'm just going to refresh the cooldown and let it restart. You can see all of my cooldowns on auto attacks are refreshing a little bit, and if I get a takedown, the duration is extended. Like, yeah, it still does affect your allies. I still do grant it to my allies, but, like, it's not the tremendous boost of speed that your defensive tanks would need to become offensive tanks. So, in that sense, Sivir's niche has changed. The conventional Sivir comp, where you just cover her in tanks, that comp is dead. But in exchange, Sivir actually does her job. She actually fills her niche. She actually has the damage to justify picking her when you want to pick her. But because she fills a niche like that, even though I think the Sivir is much, much, much stronger than the old Sivir, I'm still not convinced that she's going to be like a fully pick ban mid-scope update like Talia, like Wukong, like Swain ended up being. I think she does end up being a counter pick. I think you pick Sivir when Sivir looks good. It's just Sivir actually becomes a presence in the meta. You actually have to consider, oh wait, I can't make this look too good for Sivir, or they get to pick Sivir. Like, I had a theory kind of near the beginning when I first got my hands on her, when I first started looking at her numbers, like, oh, what if we just max W? What if we do that for the attack speed? And then because I have, like, this attack speed, I'm allowed to build just the AD crit items to optimize the ratio of this later. Like, I get to build my Mythic and then LDRIE Bloodthirster or something like that. And just, that's not the way to go. Your W damage is still pretty underwhelming in the early lane. Sivir's still, as a whole, pretty underwhelming in the early lane, but she always has the benefit of just being able to instantly push and generate a recall basically whenever she wants, which you kind of need points in Q for. You lose that strength by maxing W, unfortunately, so that theory fell through pretty quickly. And it's really, really important to note that your ultimate is such a terrible ability if you're not actually building attack speed, if you're not actually building around it, like, it gives you no value. It's still kind of worth it, like, just for the W buffs alone. And for the record, this dummy is very close to max bounce range. This is kind of like where you would expect Sivir projectiles to bounce to. I think if I drop one here, like, it might bounce back to the first one again. No, because it's finding closer targets, but... So yeah, I do expect Sivers to be finding as much attack speed as possible in their builds. Bare minimum, it's going to be like a Zeal item, but the state of Zeal items aren't very good. She's obviously not building Runons. She's obviously not building, like, Rapid Firecannon. No, because then you have to spend your W for a pot shot, and that kind of feels bad. There's no mana restore on the E anymore. It's easier to conserve your mana without that, just because the costs are lower, but I still don't think it's worth, like, building a Rapid Firecannon for 1 W pot shot. Yeah, so even though the passive and the E are better, you still need to protect Sivir a little bit. You still need to enable her to get close. The enemy has to make a mistake or something like that. She's still going to be limited in, like, jungle fights. You know, if I'm fighting somebody here, I don't have any means to extend my ricochet on a minion wave. I'd like to fight around the raptors and extend my range that way. You know, like, there's a guy here. And I can kind of, yeah, you know, bounce it there, but... Definitely, the overall conclusion, the overall vibe that I'm getting from this new Sivir. She's not pick ban. She's much, much stronger. She is actually a presence. You can still pick her. Like, you can pick her for the wave clear and not feel bad about it. You can pick her for her actual anti-front-to-back niche. Like, the best AD carry. Like, kind of like how Kai'Sa's the best AD carry in a dive mirror. I think Sivir ends up being one of the best AD carries in a front-to-back mirror. And a tank. Okay, specifically a tank-heavy front-to-back mirror. Let's be clear. And yeah, I'm excited to see her on the Rift again. I'm excited to see Sivir being a real champion. And I'm even more excited that I don't think she's so broken that you just slam her in inappropriate Sivir slots. So that's really cool. I think they did a good job in this rework. I'm going to miss the old ultimate a little bit. It kind of sucks that the ultimate's purpose has changed, but just being compensated with this much damage, I think, is more than worth it.